All right, session 1, the lost animals. What does the Bible say about dinosaurs? First of all, I'll give you a couple of sources here, and if you want to write these down or remember them, if you want to learn more, I learned all of this stuff from these two sources. Answers in Genesis, some of you may know them. They created the ark up in Kentucky. And then creation.com. Creation.com is a very easy one to remember. If you ask questions tonight that I can't answer, I promise you they can answer them. All right? So, the story of the dinosaurs. What is the story that we are told in our culture and Western civilization about the dinosaurs? Well, we're told that they lived millions of years ago, right? They lived millions of years ago. They died by a great meteor strike 65 million years ago, which caused their extinction. They never lived with human beings. Human beings and dinosaurs are very far removed from one another in time. And today there are no longer any that exist anywhere on the planet. That's the story. Well, one of the questions that I want you to focus on tonight as we talk about these things is, how on earth do you know that? How can you possibly know what happened 65 million years ago? Now, we can't even figure out who killed JFK, and that was a mere 50 or 60 years ago. So I really want you to ask, how do you know that? Let's talk about a little bit of history of the dinosaurs. They were first found by Dr. Robert Platt in 1677. 1677, I want you to remember that date. That's the first time they found a dinosaur bone. He thought he found a giant elephant or a human being. In the book, The Natural History of Oxfordshire, he called the bone Megalosaurus. 1677, the first time dinosaurs were found. Then we have a little bit later on in 1822, Gideon Mantell, his wife found a shiny tooth. He thought it belonged to an extinct plant-eating reptile. He called it iguanodon. Anybody know what the word dinosaur means? Dinosaur means terrible lizard. It's a word that was created in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. So the word dinosaur has only existed since 1841. But remember 1677, because I want to show you a few things. So remember, our story is that the dinosaurs and humans never lived together. They never knew each other. They never knew of each other. Dinosaurs have been dead far too long. There's an interesting place in England, the Carlisle Cathedral. And that cathedral, it has a carpet laying right here. And it was built in the late 1496. And underneath this carpet, there is an engraving. There's an engraving with a long tail, 4 big legs, and a long head. Do you see that? Now remember, this is 1496. And when did we find the first dinosaur bone? 1677. So this is almost 300 years before we found the first bone, and we have something with a long neck and a long tail that looks very much like a long-necked sauropod, doesn't it? Now here's my question. Stop and think for a minute. Here's my question. If dinosaurs had been dead for 65 million years, and if we had never seen them, we didn't even find a bone until 1677. Why on earth would they carve these kinds of images of things that look just like dinosaurs? How would they know? Where would they get these ideas? There is the Angkor Wat, Cambodia. There's an ancient ruins of a temple that was built about 1200 AD. It's a collection of ruins from the Khmer civilization that ruled into Southeast Asia from the end of the 9th century to the end of the 12th century. So this is about 1200. In those edifices of the temple, there are things that are carved into the stone. Right? This is 1200. So when were dinosaurs first found? 1677. So this is nearly 500 years before. And guess what? There's some carvings. Now let's look at this one carving. Where did they get this idea? Do you see what I mean? Where did we get this idea? How do you know that they're all died 65 million years ago? Where did they get this idea? Why did they do that? Doesn't that look like a stegosaurus? I mean, whether you believe in the Bible or not, just step back. It looks like a stegosaurus. How did they know if they had never seen one? Oh, now we're going to get really good. Now we're going to get really good. Now we're going to go to the Bible. Ooh, the Bible. You know, that book that everybody pokes fun at, but nobody reads. Job 40:15 through 24. Job is considered the oldest book in the Bible. It was written sometime between 1000 and 2000 BC. So remember, when did we find dinosaur bones? 1677 AD. And so we've got almost 4,000 years earlier, 1 to 2,000, 3 or 4,000 years earlier, 1 to 2,000 BC, we have a book written that describes something very interesting. Let's read this. Look at the behemoth, which I have made along with you. By the way, what's happening here is, Job, you remember the book of Job. Anybody read the book of Job lately? If you are suffering, if you are having a very hard time in your life, you need to read the book of Job. It's kind of like a lost book, because this man suffered so very much. But at the end, so Job is kind of arrogant. And at the end of the book, he's basically saying, look, if God were here, I'd tell him something. I'd give God what for if he was here. So guess what happens in the end? God shows up. And God starts to talk to Job. And what God is doing is humbling Job. He's humbling Job. Well, in the discussion, God is giving Job all of these reasons to realize that he has no right to question his Creator. He's like, who do you think you are, Job? Very, very humbling statements that God makes. But in the middle of this, he mentions this beast called the behemoth. And he says, look at the behemoth, Job, which I made along with you. Remember that phrase. Behemoth was made along with you. And which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. So we're talking about a very strong animal here. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God, yet his maker can approach him with his sword. So what God is doing out there, he's going, look, Job, let me tell you about the biggest beast I ever made. And then I want you to compare yourself to him. Go on out, Job, take a shot. See what you can do with this beast. And God is saying, look, the only one that can take the beast down is me. Let's look at some phrases here, which I made along with you. We're going to talk a little bit later about when the dinosaurs were created, which I made along with you. Just remember that phrase. He ranks first among the works of God. This means he's the biggest animal God ever made. Biggest land-dwelling animal he ever made. And here's our phrase. His tail sways like a cedar. Now, a cedar tree in the Middle East at this time, a cedar tree was a massive tree. It would be like saying, his tail sways like a red oak. That's the kind of language that's being used here. Now, I have an NIV Bible, and in my NIV Bible on Job 40:15, it has a footnote. And it says, possibly a hippopotamus or an elephant. Now, here's what I want to make a point here. All right? Whether you believe the Bible or not, let's just think this through for a minute. Is there any way on earth that those words are describing an elephant? They're not. Now, you might say, well, I don't know how it got in there, but I don't believe it. But still, is it? Let's look at this. Anybody ever seen the tail of an elephant? It's like a strap. It's like that, isn't it? Big old tail. No, it's like a strap. Remember, the tail sways like a cedar. My friends, for all of you who are Christian in here, you know, I think folks who don't believe the Bible today, they don't believe in a Bible that they really don't know anything about. That's my experience. But you know what? We who believe it, we believe in a Bible we don't know anything about either. Because we will translate a scripture and say that it's a hippopotamus or an elephant when God said it had a tail like a cedar tree. What is that but flat unbelief? I just don't believe you, God. But there you go. If you see that at the zoo, get out of there. Okay? Doesn't it fit this a lot better? Doesn't it fit the brachiosaur a lot better? His bones are like iron. His tail sways like a cedar. This takes us to a very important point here. There are two types of science. This is a breakthrough for me when I realized this, when I learned this. That there are two types of science, and we get them confused all the time, and we go back and forth between the two, and people who are telling us that evolution is true and all of that, they're going back and forth between the two all the time, and we don't recognize it. The first is called observational science. Now, what is the root word of observational? Observe. What does observe mean? It's something you can see. Observational science deals with the scientific method. Remember that? What does the scientific method start with? Somebody tell me. Observation. Observation. Hypothesis, observation, testing, experiment, conclusion, and you start all over, don't you? But it all hinges on what you can see, what you can test in real time. It deals with the present. That's observational science. But there's another type of science, and this is the one that gets us. Historical science. This is when I'm taking what I see dinosaur bones, I see the Grand Canyon, I see death and suffering, and I'm trying to create a story, a narrative, an explanation of what happened in the past to bring about all of these things I see in the present. Does that make sense? Historical, I'm looking backwards. But the thing about it is, it deals with the past, of course, and it's based on faith. Why? Because you cannot directly observe the past. You cannot observe the creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Who was there? I know my kids think I was there. No, I only go back to Noah's Ark. Deals with the past. So what we have is, let me give you an example. See if you can figure this out. Which one is this? This is a statement from an actual article. It's talking about a rodent, actually. It's talking about a rat that they found, bones that they found. This is the quote. But this one's skull was huge, more than half a meter, that's about 20 inches long, suggesting an animal about 3 meters in length, weighing more than a metric ton. That's a big rat. Okay, is this historical or is this observational? It's observational, isn't it? Why? Because I have something that I measured, something that I'm looking at, and then I'm extrapolating size from that measurement. That's not really talking about history. That's just talking about what I have now. But what about this one? The article goes on. This is the same article. But when North and South America were linked about 3 million years ago, the rodents were swamped by North American animals and eventually died out. That's historical. You see, how do you know that? How do you actually know that? You're hypothesizing, you're trying to explain it, but don't tell me to stop believing in the Bible because of a story that you made up. Look at this. So we've got historical and observational. Observational is going to be built on facts that are available in the present. So we find shells in the ground, we find we look at the stars, we look out at the galaxies, that exists in the present. But both evolution and creation are historical. They're dealing with something that we cannot see. They are explanations of what happened in the past to bring about the present. Does that make sense? So in each case, you have to put your faith in one or the other. It's not a matter of that science and evolution is hard and cold fact, and Christianity and faith in the Bible is just all about faith. Not true. They are both trying to explain something that happened in the past. My beliefs decide how I explain what I see in the world. Let me ask you a question. This is for my young people. If you were to go out in the woods today and dig up a dinosaur bone, are you digging up the present or the past? No. You're digging up the bone right now, aren't you? It exists right now. It doesn't exist 65 million years ago. For you, it's just right now. They don't come out of the ground with a tag on them that says, hey, I'm 65 billion years old. You did good, buddy. You did good, but do you see the point? You see what I'm saying? You are only seeing something now. You're not seeing the past. You're seeing the present. And what we want to do tonight when we talk about dinosaurs and really everything else is we want to put on the glasses of the Bible. You see, you've been seeing the world through evolutionary glasses for 50 years. I remember the first time that I heard about Homo sapiens when I was a kid. I was 8 or 9 years old, and my sister came home and said, "Oh yeah, we're just Homo sapiens. We evolved from monkeys." And I thought, "Oh my goodness, that doesn't sound good. Let's go play basketball." We want to look through the Bible and see what the Bible tells us about the past that brought dinosaurs about. Now, why would I say that? Someone might say, "Well, Wes, you're just a fool, and you just don't want to face the facts, and you want to look through this mythological Bible and just somehow make it true." Well, you'll learn more about me as we go on tonight, but I was once an atheist. I have not always believed the Bible. I used to think the Bible was a book of moral stories. Jesus was a good guy, but he wasn't the Son of God. There was no God in heaven actually after all. I used to believe that. But what I have found is, over time, that you test the Bible over and over for years. This is why you believe it, isn't it? Those of you who believe, you don't think you're a fool, do you? Jerry, you think you're a fool? You don't think you're a fool? Carrie, do you think you're a fool? No, you don't. You're intelligent people, those of you who believe. You don't want to believe a myth, all right? But what we've done is we've tested the Bible over and over in our minds. We've tested it in our experiences, and we found, guess what? The thing is true. So that's where we're coming from. That's where we're coming from. So we're just going to talk about two more things relative to the dinosaurs, or what I call the lost animals. Where did the lost animals come from? Where did they come from? And what happened to them? And we're going to look at this through the lens of the Bible. Where did they come from? First of all, let's define something here. A dinosaur, do you know a dinosaur? Let me ask you a question. Is a dinosaur a land animal only, or a land, air, and sea animal? It's just a land animal. Look it up. Dinosaurs are only referred to as land animals. There are flying creatures that they consider dinosaur-like. This is all from the evolutionary model, all right? All from evolution. And there are sea creatures they call sea monsters that supposedly lived at the same time, but they're not dinosaurs. Specifically speaking, dinosaurs are land animals, okay? So it's very important that we establish that when we talk about where or when they were created and how they got here. All right, so land animals. When did God make land animals? Ian, do you remember? He's thinking. That's right. Day 6. Let's look at this. We're going to the Bible now, all right? You've heard the story of evolution your whole life. I'm now going to tell you what God has said. Genesis 1:24. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. So the evening and the morning were the 6th day." Now let's just from the Bible, again, you don't have to believe it, but let's just reason from the Bible together. A dinosaur is a land animal. God said he made all land animals on day 6 of creation week. There are 6 24-hour days that God worked. By the way, God did not create in 7 days. He created in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. So on the 6th day, the last thing God did was he made the land animals, and then he made man. Therefore, working straight from the Bible, did dinosaurs and man live together? They did, because God made them both on the same day. Now remember what God said in Job 40. He said, remember Behemoth, whom I made along with you? And now we go back to Genesis, and it says, oh my, on day 6, God made them both. Do you see that? God made them on day 6. By the way, why did God make man last? Because you are the most special, the most important, the most powerful and amazing creation God ever made. And this is the great tragedy of evolution, that God made you last because you're special and he loves you, and evolution says you're nothing more than an evolved animal and you have no more worth than a plant or a tree. Do you really want to believe that? Land animals. So they were created on day 6. So what happened to them then, Wes? If God created them on day 6, why aren't they here anymore? Where did they go? All right, so After years and years of studying this and a lot of deep contemplation, I've come to understand what happened to the dinosaurs. They were chain smokers. Adam, he must have farmed tobacco. And they just couldn't stop smoking. I thought that was funny. Big tobacco does it again. No, according to the evolutionary story, how did they die? By a great meteor that hit the earth, threw up all kinds of material, created a nuclear winter, so to speak, and all the dinosaurs died. That's the story that we're told. So that it's based on two things, that there are large craters in places on the earth, assumed to have come from meteor strikes. So we see these big meteor strikes. And then we have traces of something. This is going to go a little bit deeper now, all right? So we're going to go a little bit deeper below the surface. There's traces of an element called iridium that's thought to come from meteors, and they found that in different places all over the world, iridium. And I know you guys know how to spell that. But when you put that together, their reasoning is, well, because we find this iridium, and iridium comes from meteors, and we see these big meteor strikes in different places in the world, then that must be what killed the dinosaurs. And that's what we hear most frequently, isn't it? That's what we're told. But did you know that's one of only several dozen theories? Let me read a little something to you here. Michael Ord, in a magazine called Creation Ex Nihilo, this is what he wrote. Some dinosaur extinction theories say that dinosaurs died from the cold, while others say that they died from the heat, or else it was too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. One theory says that the climate became too wet, while another that the climate dried out to kill off the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs could have starved to death. These are all the theories. They could have starved to death or died from overeating, or their extinction may have been caused by a nutritional problem. Or the flowering plants could have evolved poisons that killed the dinosaurs, as some theories suggest. Others thought the water became poisonous with chemicals. Another ingenious twist is that butterflies and moths evolved, and the larvae stripped the plants of leaves, causing the plant-eating dinosaurs to pass away. Some say that there were too many meat-eating dinosaurs, and they ate all the ones that were plant-eating, and then they didn't have anything else to eat, so that they died. Astronomical and geophysical causes have often been used. For instance, a change in the Earth's gravity, the axial tilt, or a reversal in the magnetic field. Some say a sudden bath in cosmic radiation. One theory is that a supernova exploded near the Earth, and on and on and on. You see, here's the thing. We are told, now listen to me, you're going to think I'm crazy for a minute, but hear me out. We are told what they want us to hear. Look, just because you put on a lab coat does not mean you lose your worldly nature. Just because you get a PhD behind your name doesn't mean that you stop being arrogant, stop being proud, stop worrying about being a failure, that you want power, you want people to believe what you want them to believe. Do you see what I mean? Just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that you stop being fallen. So we're frequently told what they want us to hear. How many of you ever heard of this? See what I mean? We're told it's the crater and it's the meteors and that's what killed them. Let me show you something here. There was actually a television show I saw a few years ago based on a BBC article, and it's called What Really Killed the Dinosaurs. This is from 2008. I'll give you a couple of clips from this, a couple of quotes. Until recently, this is the BBC now. Everybody knows what the BBC is, right? They're the ones that make all those good British shows. Until recently, most scientists thought they knew what killed the dinosaurs. A 10-kilometer wide meteorite. It was thought that the dinosaurs were blasted, roasted, and frozen to death in that order. But now a small but vociferous, that means aggressive, group of scientists believes that there is increasing evidence that this impact theory could be wrong. Wait a minute, you've been telling me since I was 8 years old that they died from meteors, and therefore I don't believe the Bible anymore because I believe the dinosaurs were killed by a meteor. And now you're going to come along and you're going to start to change that story? I gave up Jesus for the dinosaurs, and now you're saying that you were wrong? In the video, it says maybe they died out gradually for completely different reasons. So how did they die according to the Bible? The flood killed them. The flood killed them. Do you remember what the flood is? A global catastrophe. This is what God says. The earth also was corrupt before God. This is Genesis chapter 6. And the earth was filled with violence. Pause. Isn't that America today? Are we not corrupt before God? Are we not filled with violence? Why on earth? Somebody got shot at a church today. Today in New England. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. God says, look, I've had it. Chapter 7, for after seven more days, I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I made. Now we're going to talk about the global flood next, so we're not going to go too much deeper now. But God says, I'm going to kill everything that I made. Dinosaurs were things God made. Is that not correct? Therefore, dinosaurs were destroyed in the global flood. And we're going to talk more about them in a little bit later. I know you've got a lot of questions about that. But look who was saved. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark. 2 of every sort, 2 of every kind. To keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, the animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing on the earth after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. So, God made land animals on day 6. He brought 2 of every kind of land animal into the ark, and everything else was destroyed. Therefore, guess what was on the ark? Dinosaurs. You go, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that. Wes, you crazy Christians, you guys have lost it. Okay, I realize that it may seem that way. I realize that. Because here's my proposition to you if you think I'm crazy. It's okay. I think I'm crazy a lot of time too. But you have only been told one story your whole life. Therefore, by definition, when you hear something else, you're going to think it's crazy. So what happened then? If they were on the ark, Wes, why aren't they all alive today? Well, it's funny, we do have things called living dinosaurs, and this is part of the stuff I couldn't tell you because I just didn't have the time. But let me ask you a question. How do animals go extinct today? They're overhunted. What else? Disease. What else? Pardon me? The land taken, changed. Food supply, they kill each other. My friends, we've got this idea that a dinosaur is some kind of special creature. It's a land animal. That's why they call it the lost land animals. Land animals become extinct every day. After the flood, things changed. Have you ever read the Bible and noticed what happens to the age of man, how long we live after the global flood? We've got 700, 800, 900 years. You think that's crazy too, I know, but why? What's to say that we're not supposed to live longer? Who says that? Who are you who are over 60 or even over 70 thinking, gosh, this went really fast? God made us to live longer. But the global flood changed all that, and you see it. You can track it. You can see the ages go down, go down, go down, go down. And here we are today. Imagine if you could live 500 years. Imagine the things you could learn, the things you could do, things you could learn about God in 500 years. Ken Ham, who is the president of the ministry that built the Ark Encounter, he said this about living and surviving after the flood. He said, along with other animals, the dinosaurs came out to breed and repopulate the earth. But the world they came out to repopulate differed from the one they knew before Noah's flood. The flood had devastated it. It was now a much more difficult world in which to survive. Even for man, the world had become a harsher place. Both animals and man would find their ability to survive tested to the uttermost. We can see from the fossil record, from the written history of man, and from experience over recent centuries that many forms of life have not survived that test. I can't wait till we get to the global flood. I'm going to show you a picture. Cool picture of a lot of water. So when were they created? They were created on day 6. How did they die? They died in the global flood. Some of them survived long after the flood. We see the carvings. Remember, we saw the carving of a stegosaurus. Where did that come from? We saw an engraving of a long-necked sauropod. Where did that come from? How do you explain that away? So the Bible gives us this view. Now, I told you I was going to finish this session back in Job. And this is the theme of this session. This is what I want you to leave thinking about. All right? In Job 38:4, when God just gets going talking to Job, you remember Job's problem. What God was correcting in Job was arrogance. Job suffered, and then he charged at God and said, God is not being fair with me, and if he was here, I would let him know what the deal is. And God shows up, and he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Where were you? I want you to step back for a minute, and I want you to consider the blind, crazy arrogance of humanity. We live 60 or 70 years on the earth, and we think we know everything. And we think we're going to tell the mighty Creator who has lived forever, we're going to take His Bible and His Word, we're just going to get out of here. Where were you? Where were you, scientist? Where were you, doubter? Where were you? Let's humble ourselves tonight. Let's humble ourselves and at least allow for the possibility that God's Word is true, that there is a God in heaven, that He has spoken. Because if you've come here tonight with that kind of a puffed up pride and cockiness, you'll never learn anything. Because you've already said, I'm not going to learn. I want you to humble yourself just for a couple of hours and allow for the possibility that the Bible is true. And that you are not evolved from a monkey or an amoeba, but you are created by God and you are a unique, special creation. Can you do that for me?